Happy Monday, football fans. Harrison Graham here with another episode of Four Verts as we are going to react to the Steelers and Dolphins Blockbuster Trade that went down earlier this morning. And this is why you subscribe. When big news happens, whether it's during the season or in the dog days of the offseason, you never know. That's what makes sports awesome. You never know when something crazy is going to happen, like the Steelers and Dolphins striking a blockbuster deal. Subscribe to the channel. We got you covered every single day, 24/7, 365 here on Four Verts. We're trying to get to 11,000 subscribers ASAP. Help us get there by hitting that subscribe button. All right, here were the full trade details because information was kind of trickling in one by one. Initially, it was just Jalen Ramsey announces himself that he's being traded to the Steelers. Then we found out a few minutes later that Minkah Fitzpatrick is going back to Miami. We thought it was just a one-for-one swap. Then we found out Jonnu Smith is also getting traded to Pittsburgh. The veteran tight end reunites with Arthur Smith. And then a late-round pick swap in 2027. Steelers get a 7th, and Miami gets a 5th. I'm going to break this down for each team and kind of give my thoughts of this trade because there's obviously a lot of moving parts here. Let's talk about the Steelers because I think they're the headline of this trade. They've been one of the headline teams this offseason when you trade for DK Metcalf, when you play the Aaron Rodgers saga game, and he finally signs a couple of weeks ago. And now you go get Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. This is certainly fascinating. When I initially saw they traded for Jalen Ramsey, I was like, okay, I'm curious to see what this cost. And I got to be honest, when I saw that they were shipping out Minkah Fitzpatrick, my initial thought was, wait a second. Is Jalen Ramsey more valuable and better right now than Minkah Fitzpatrick is? I don't really know that that's the case. I don't think either is coming off the best year of their careers. By any means, Ramsey's over 30 now. I think he's going to be 31 this year. Minkah's going to be 29, so he's a little bit younger. So not only do they get older, they also go with a more expensive player in Jalen Ramsey, who somehow got $1.5 million raise out of all this. I don't really know where that came from. I thought Minkah kind of had an average year last year, so maybe if Pittsburgh feels like, well, with what we're paying Fitzpatrick, he's not contributing what he used to, and Jalen Ramsey, even if he isn't at the peak of his powers, that gives us one of the best CB trios in the NFL with Ramsey, obviously Darius Slay, and also Joey Porter Jr., who they drafted a couple of years ago. So if that's what they're thinking, maybe. And my initial guess and thought would be, okay, if Ramsey stays at corner, I think in nickel sets he'll play nickel because he's done that a lot with Miami and LA the last few years, with Porter and Slay on the outside. And then in base downs, Ramsey will slide outside, Slay will go to the bench, and Joey Porter will be the other outside corner. That would be my guess. And look, that's a very, very formidable cornerback room. What's not as formidable is their safety room, right? Like if you tell me, would you rather have that trio of with Ramsey at corner with Porter and also Darius Slay, or would you rather not have Ramsey and still have Minkah Fitzpatrick with Deshaun Elliott with like Juan Thornhill and Miles Killebrew as like your depth safeties? I think I'd rather take the former. So now I feel like there's kind of a hole at safety. It sounds like Juan Thornhill had a pretty good minicamp period. He's been banged up the last couple of years, hasn't played that well. So if he can get back to what he was with the Chiefs several years back, can he and Elliott be formidable enough? I suppose Elliott's been a pretty good player for them. But I don't know that one-for-one swap actually upgrades the defense. Now, when you add Jonnu Smith, sure, in principle, that 2-for-1 is probably a net win for 2025. And I guess when you add it all up and the money involvement, taking on Ramsey and giving Jonnu Smith a 1-year, $12 million extension while keeping Minkah and his $20 million salary, I get it. It's a lot of money. But it kind of feels like that the Steelers are going all in for 2025. So wouldn't you have rather just kept Fitzpatrick and then you just have this dominant defense if everyone's healthy, right? If TJ's healthy and they still got to figure out his contract, maybe that played a role in shipping out Fitzpatrick. Your front four is pretty dominant. Good linebacker group with Patrick Queen in the mix there. And then you would have a pretty damn dominant secondary as well, but losing Fitzpatrick kind of leaves a hole at safety. Maybe they try Ramsey at safety. Maybe they go out and sign Justin Simmons, who's still available in free agency. But I find that pretty interesting. I don't know if it's a net positive in the secondary. I do think Jonnu Smith is a good get. He knows Arthur Smith well, so picking up the offense will be pretty easy for him. Another weapon for Aaron Rodgers, which was a must because they have DK Metcalf and a bunch of just okay receivers. Pat Freiermuth is a solid tight end. Now you add Jonnu Smith, so probably a lot of 12 personnel. Probably going to run the football a lot with Caleb Johnson, run play action off of that. I think that's the identity that they're going to try to build this year under Arthur Smith. So we'll see how it plays out. But I feel like Pittsburgh thinks they're closer than they are, and they're taking a big swing. I think I'm going to do a full video on this later this week, maybe even tomorrow, of like just a little teaser here. Is this potentially Mike Tomlin's last year? And I know we've thought that for years now, that could be the case, but maybe they've kind of mutually agreed like, hey, let's take this massive swing in 2025, and if it doesn't work, we'll just part ways. If it does, hey, awesome. We had this kind of last hurrah with Aaron Rodgers, and, it was worth it. But I don't feel like they've closed the gap on themselves and the truly elite teams in the AFC. Okay, the Dolphins side of this. So they unload Ramsey and his contract. We'll get to the financials of that later on. They get rid of Jonnu Smith, which that does leave a pretty big hole at tight end. Their tight end room's pretty bad. But they did not want to give him that $12 million extension, which he got from Pittsburgh, so I get it. And then they get Minkah Fitzpatrick back, a guy they drafted in the first round several years ago. If you remember, they lost their safety earlier this offseason to the Giants. I'm blanking on his name right now as he went to New York. Javon Holland, thank you, producer Colin. So replace him pretty seamlessly with Minkah, so that helps. Minkah's only 29, didn't have his best year last year, but I think in an Anthony Weaver defense where they're pretty exotic in the secondary, I think Fitzpatrick can get back to being a more productive playmaker in the secondary. And if it doesn't work out, they can pivot off his contract next offseason pretty easily. So I kind of like this for Miami to bring Minkah back. If it was him or like another late day 3 pick, I don't mind bringing Fitzpatrick back into the fold. It helps replace Ramsey, even if it is at a different position. It definitely helps replace Javon Holland. Now, one thing the Dolphins are facing is their corner room. I mean, this is as bad as it gets. Like, I got nothing against Storm Duck, but when that's your CB1, you're in big trouble. Keep an eye on Stephon Gilmore here for Miami to potentially sign him as a veteran just to help get through this season, right? I mean, I do think this is like a slight signal of a long-term play for Miami. It's not just about 2025, which I appreciate because I don't think the Dolphins are a true contender this year, but you still have to play this year, right? You're still trying to win, at least the players and coaches are. So I do think they're going to have to add a corner in some regard, and they're also probably going to have to add a tight end. That's already been reported that the Dolphins, this is per Tom Pelissero, that the Dolphins are in talks with teams to add to that tight end room because I'll put it this way, the only tight end I can name in that room is Pharaoh Brown, and he's not very good at all. So we'll see who they get. Could a guy like Michael Mayer spring loose from Vegas? There was chatter earlier this offseason that he could be a player on the move. Kyle Pitts could be an interesting one. Not much of a blocker, and in the Shanahan-type offense, you typically prefer guys who can block, but you need somebody. Maybe Smith just becomes your receiving tight end. The other guys they currently have can block. So keep an eye on that for Miami. But I got to be honest, I think all in all, especially when you factor in this, Spotrac with this note that the Dolphins sent out $25 million in salary, bringing back $15 on Fitzpatrick's deal, that frees up cash and kind of more flexibility for Miami. So I like that for a team who's probably not truly contending this year. And then Ian Rapoport took it further with this note that Miami had already paid Jalen Ramsey $4 million. They're going to add an extra $3 million to facilitate the trade for $7 million total. But Steelers are going to pay the rest of the $26.6 million this year, which is $19.6 million. So again, if you're Miami, you bring back a guy Minkah Fitzpatrick, and if it doesn't work out, if his downward play kind of continues, you can pivot off his deal next offseason via trade or cut pretty easily without much dead cap penalty. So I think all in all, as I ask you guys, who won the trade, Pittsburgh or Miami? I think as I'm sitting here today, I think I like it for Miami more. Now, for Pittsburgh, I will say they have a ton of draft picks next year, so I can appreciate an aggressive swing, and even if it blows up in their face, it's not catastrophic, but I do think there's a little bit of delusional thought happening in Pittsburgh, like, oh, we're pretty close. We think Rodgers and a couple pieces get us over the edge. It's like, is going from Wilson to Rodgers and a couple of player swaps, DK instead of Pickens, Ramsey instead of Fitzpatrick. Is that the difference in not getting blown out by the Ravens in the first round like they did last year? I'm not sure it is. So, we'll talk more about the Steelers on a different video moving forward because I have some thoughts on what they're doing. But if you ask me right now, I think Miami won the trade because I don't think either's contending at a high level this year. And I think Miami just got a little bit more kind of money flexible moving forward. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Four Verts. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. You guys let us know who you think won the trade. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys soon.